So I'm Pennsylvania Governor Tom Wolf, and you're listening to the True Philadelphia Podcast with Matt O'Donnell.
Governor Tom Wolf won re-election last November with 57% of the vote, overwhelming his Republican challenger Scott Wagner. The governor and I get together every year before the Greater Philadelphia Chamber of Commerce to engage in a discussion simply called A Conversation with the Governor. I'm allowed to ask him anything. Politics, as you will hear, is just the starting point. Here now with the first episode of the new True Philadelphia Podcast is my full, unedited conversation in front of a live audience with Pennsylvania Governor Tom Wolf. Thank you. Governor,
Matt,
thanks for joining us. I'll be recording this for a podcast. I'll tweet some information about this later in case some people would like to listen to our conversation later. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Congratulations on your re-election.
Thank you.
I was trying to think of a phrase to sum up your campaign, and I came up with this. That was easy.
See, that's what I like about this guy. You laugh at the lamest jokes.
So, did you learn anything about the state, about yourself, and how did it compare to your first campaign?
Well, a governor is term limited in Pennsylvania, so it's the only time I could run for re-election, and I'm very satisfied with that. I'm not sure why any body in public life would be against term limits. That's what I learned.
We've been through this before. Explain to me how a state that President Trump carried in 2016 was able to re-elect overwhelmingly its Democratic governor and its Democratic U.S. senator.
I think the people of Pennsylvania are looking for leaders they have some confidence in, some trust. And I think they're looking for competence, and they're looking for integrity. And if they don't think that the people running give them that, they're not going to support them. If they think, on the other hand, that they do see some areas where they can trust the person, they'll vote for that person.
If Scott Wagner came up to you before his campaign and asked you some advice, what would you tell him?
I've known Scott a long time. We're both from York County.
Sure.
So we basically just ask each other a lot of questions, but I don't think we give each other too much advice. Was
the Alex Trebek debate a little strange for you? How was that?
Debate? It was like tough getting a word in edgewise. It was an unusual exercise.
So you'll leave it at that?
Yes.
Do you feel the voters deserved more than one debate from its governor's race?
No, I didn't. And I think both the Wagner campaign and my campaign made a big effort to get our views out and the distinctions between us. And I think that's what's important, that in a democracy, people need to make sure that when they go to vote, they understand what the differences, what the contrasts are. And I think they had that. And 1 or 2 or 3 or 10 more debates would not have changed that.
You mentioned you're now term limited. So the idea a lot of people have is that, well, now this is Governor Wolf unshackled, unleashed, and he's going to go in there, he's going to be brash, and he's going to be bold, and he's not going to care about what people think. And I haven't gotten that sense from you as to that's going to be your temperament.
Well, no, I've only been in politics for 4 years, so this is not my life, my whole life. And I got into it because I wanted to make Pennsylvania's political system better. And that's what I was focused on. That's what I cared about, and that's what I still care about. So it's not that I have been liberated by not having to seek re-election. I have more time to focus on the things I really like about this job. But I care about the same things I cared about 3 years ago.
The legislature has fewer Republicans, but it's said to be more conservative because of the loss of some moderates and some people coming who are more conservative. How is that going to change the way you deal with the legislature?
First of all, I'm not sure that these labels make that big a difference, but I think each chamber is probably more liberal. The Republican caucus, which is the majority caucus in both the Senate and the House, is more conservative. In terms of changing things, the same leaders are in place. The majority leader in the House is different because the former majority leader retired. But I think the relationships with the individual members of leadership on both caucuses in both chambers are pretty much the same as they were in my first term.
So you don't see much of a change in negotiation or between you and the legislature?
I think we had areas where we disagreed before. We still do. We had areas of common purpose where we felt we could actually come up with some things that we could agree on, and I think we did over the last 4 years, and I think we still have those areas. So I'm looking forward to working with the legislature.
Who wants to talk about the budget? The sexy Pennsylvania budget.
Why are they all falling asleep?
One of the things that really sticks out is your request for a shell severance tax, which you've asked every year. This is your fifth year.
Not in the budget, though, man.
Yes, so it's outside of the budget.
Right.
And what you do is you offer a carrot where the money that comes in, you would offer to pay for some capital projects around the state. Is the legislature going to bite on that?
I don't know, and I wasn't trying to create anything that was... I was just trying to make a point that you all know that the severance tax is something that every body in Pennsylvania pays. It's just that the money that we pay when we buy a gallon of gasoline or a piece of plastic goes to places that have a severance tax, like Texas and Alaska and Oklahoma and Louisiana. It doesn't come to Pennsylvania. And if we have a reasonable severance tax, as I think they do, that's in line with what the other states do, then we could get Texans and Louisianans and Alaskans and Canadians to pay for the things that we think are important. So that's the first thing about this severance tax. Even the independent fiscal offices, the overwhelming majority of this would be paid for by non-Pennsylvanians. But then I tied it to specific things that we know we need. Last year, as you all know, we had a lot of flooding here in Philadelphia County, Upper Darby, Bradford County, Schuylkill County, York and Lancaster County, Dauphin County, and out in the west, Allegheny County. And I would go out to these places. And every time I'd go out, you'd see people whose lives have been completely changed by these floods. Their homes had been washed away. I mean, devastation, tragedy. And all I could say was, I'm sorry for your loss. And I wanted something where I could say, okay, the state actually can do something now. Because all we had was the ability to say, if we can get this flood damage to rise to a certain level that passes muster in Washington, I think it's $19 million of damage, they could declare a disaster and you could get some money from the feds to help dig out from this storm. With these localized storms we had last year, rarely got to that threshold. And Pennsylvania didn't have any money for that. So here is something that we can go out and say, I can do something to help you get back on your feet. You go up into northern tier Pennsylvania and parts of Philadelphia, and people don't have access to the internet. This is the 21st century. Let's do something about that. Let's invest in making sure that every Pennsylvanian has access, big access to the internet, to broadband. And that's what this is about. So instead of tying this to some amorphous thing that might go through the general fund, I separated it from the budget and said, let's use this source of funding and let's dedicate it, $4.5 billion, to really making lives better. You have flooding, you need internet access. Here in Philadelphia, we need pads to consolidation so that manufacturers can come in and say, here's land that you can use right here. This is what we could use this for. It would actually go directly to these folks. So I wasn't trying to sweeten anything. I was saying we need this. Here's a source of funding that would really not only not hurt anybody, would actually help us bring money in from outside. Let's do this.
Are you concerned about the pipelines and the behavior that's been taking place, the sinkholes, the idea that the Chester County DA has opened a criminal investigation, said that some companies were hiring what he called muscle at the scene of some of these sinkholes?
Yeah, I'm concerned. And I want the gas industry to be wildly successful in Pennsylvania because that'll make Pennsylvania successful. And part of that is to make sure that we have ways to transport materials, like gas, from one place to another. But you have to do it right. And we have a lot of people who are constructing pipelines who are doing it right. Some are not. And as you might know, on Friday I shut down that pipeline.
No new taxes in your budget.
Right.
Something you're proud of.
I'm proud of two things. One, that I could actually make over $500 million of new investments in things that all of us think are important, like education, like training. I could do that at the same time, do it in a way because we have managed, and I say we, not the royal we, but the administration, members, leaders in the administration, we have managed agencies so that we actually can deliver good public service in a more efficient way, so that I can balance the budget, not ask for new taxes, and still invest $500 million new dollars in the things that are going to make our lives better.
During your inaugural address, you said that you want Pennsylvania to be a place where we don't wait around for Amazon to move here because we're building the next Amazon. That's a pretty big statement to say you're building a company that's going to have an enormous market cap, bigger than maybe ever before.
How many of you are from Pennsylvania? Put your hands up. Yeah, look. So, am I wrong? We should be very proud of our state. I grew up here. I was born here. And I keep saying this. If you just sort of, from an objective point of view, just looked at all the states in the Union and listed their attributes, and then looked at them, Pennsylvania would be the dominant state in this country. We have 2 world-class cities. This country started here. The Declaration of Independence was drafted and signed here, and it was reaffirmed in blood at the Battle of Gettysburg in Pennsylvania. This is an amazing place. I built a big business here, and it was headquartered in New York, and a lot of our workers were Pennsylvanians. This is a great place to do business. There is not one thing that I would not be proud of. It's a beautiful state. It's a big state. It's located in one of the best places in the world, smack dab in the middle of one of the richest markets in the world. So I keep trying to use this position and the bully pulpit to keep saying, hey, come on, Pennsylvania, we're really great. We don't have to brag about it. We don't have to be arrogant about it. But I think we ought to have the self-confidence that we have a lot of good things going for us, and that's what I was trying to say in that inaugural address.
Was HQ2 a sham?
I don't think so. I think they were really looking. I think we learned something from doing that. And I think one of the things we've learned is how good we are. We have some things we need to do. I think the workforce readiness that the chamber and right and left have come together on, we recognize we have more work to do there, and I think Amazon sort of reinforced that. But in the course of looking at what we do have, I think we could also take great pride in the fact that 2 of Pennsylvania's 2 major cities were both finalists in the Amazon list. That's pretty impressive.
Apparently, Amazon is reconsidering the New York City site because of public opposition. Do you foresee reopening the game and maybe getting back in, or have you gotten a phone call?
Always talking.
Okay.
I'm always selling Pennsylvania.
Are you happy with the state of the roads? We have snow coming in. It's going to... We have the temperatures are going to be fluctuating. We're going to have more potholes out there. I know the pothole thing is a huge issue, particularly for people in this part of the state. Are you happy with the state of the roads, the state roads?
I'll never be happy with the state of the roads. And as you know, last year we had some really tough storms. I know every politician will try to justify the potholes, but we actually found $183 million in savings from contracts, money that had built up over the last 3 years, and used that to patch roads. And it was just that, patching. And in fact, I went out and participated in 2 or 3 of those patching expeditions, which I think proved to me that I should not be doing that particular job. But we have a lot of work there. Thanks to work that was done before I became governor, Act 89, we actually have, in this chamber, we have money that we can invest in bridges and roads, resurfacing and fixing bridges. We've gone from, I think, dead last in the country in terms of substandard bridges and bad roads to we're probably not very far from the bottom, but we're not at the bottom anymore. So we're making some progress, but we have a long way to go.
You propose a per-resident fee for municipalities who use the state police for police protection. This has been an ongoing issue for a lot of communities, and how a lot of this money should be used to go to improve the roads across the state. In that proposal, are you trying to, A, get a lot of these towns to simply create their own police forces, or B, are you trying to maybe have them look at doing a regional police force, which we have seen happen in some parts of the state?
No, I'm trying to get them to pay for what they use. I mean, we all know there's no such thing as a free lunch, and one of the artifices of Pennsylvania statute is that if you want to have the state police cover your municipality, you can have them do that for free. Well, come on. There is no such thing as a free lunch. And so if more and more municipalities have the state police cover their territory, two things are going to happen. One is you're going to have fewer people covering, or the same number of people covering more territory, and you're going to have that money come from some other pool. Well, the pool it comes from is the pool that should go to fixing bridges and roads. Act 89, put money in for state police, but more and more has gone to support state police to fill this role for free. So what I proposed 2 years ago, starting 2 years ago, was just flat fee. Just, okay, $25 per person. If you want to do the state police or out of your own police force, that's your decision as a municipality, but it's not going to be free. You have to pay for it. And this year, trying something, trying to make it a little more palatable, I think, and that is to say, okay, if you're a really small municipality, it'll still be free. But if you're a certain level of population, it'll be this, and the fee will grow. At its maximum, the fee will still be less than any municipality, I think, would pay on average for police coverage. But it's something that will go to fund state police academy classes. It'll be something to say we aren't going to be rating the money that would go to fix bridges and highways to pay for this. So I'm not really trying to get people to stop using it. I'm not trying to get them to do anything other than just pay for the service that they want.
Governor Rendell proposed putting a toll on I-80, and that fell flat. Have you ever discussed proposing that again, doing a trial balloon of some sort? To try and create new revenue?
No.
Moving right along. Flat out no.
I've only been in politics for 4 years, but I learned some things.
The Philadelphia School Board, it's been nearly a year since its formation, the end of the SRC. Are you happy with what you've seen so far with the Philadelphia School Board in the district?
Well, yeah, I mean, first of all, I was a strong supporter of local control. Every other school district, I think, in Pennsylvania is controlled locally. There are some school districts, a handful in distress, that have a temporary receiver, but the idea is that your school district is under local control. And so I supported that. I also support more funding from the state for all school districts, including the school district of Philadelphia, and I think we still have a ways to go to get to that. So I know Bill was talking about putting money back into the school system, but Pennsylvania remains fairly low in the rankings in the country in terms of the state's funding its share of public education, and that affects school districts all across the Commonwealth, including right here in Philadelphia. So I'm not happy with where the state is in terms of investing in its school system.
The state college system, the chancellor said it's not a pretty picture. Have we gotten to the point where we really need to consider perhaps closing some schools, making some schools more like major specific, rather than offering a broad, liberal arts education?
I don't think we're right there yet. I think what Matt's talking about is we have a new chancellor of the state system of higher education. There are 14 state universities from Westchester, Cheney, Kutztown, Millersville, Shippensburg, all across California, Slippery Rock. And he comes with amazing credentials. He was with the Gates Foundation before he came to Pennsylvania, and I helped recruit him. And one of the things that interested him was that we do have problems. Every institution of higher education right now, there's a demographic trough. So everybody's struggling with that reality, demographic reality. And so that's something that this person would have found wherever he went. But here, there's a chance to basically reinvent higher education. And I think that's what attracted him to Pennsylvania. And it's what I find exciting about this particular time. Let's figure out what we need to do. It's not a pretty picture. We have a lot of work to do. We have to change a lot of things around, but we can make the state system a model for higher education. And I'm not sure why we shouldn't be trying to do exactly that. If we have the plan, and he's working on that right now, and a strategy and vision for where higher education ought to be in that state system, there's no question that I think the General Assembly, the people of Pennsylvania, would be very supportive of that.
Could you see a contraction in the number of schools across the state?
You mean in the state system or just generally?
The state system of the 14.
I don't see that at this point. I mean, what I see is there are 107,000 students in those 14 schools right now. And the families of those students are looking for, in each case, looking for a good education. I mean, one of the first things he did when he got here was go around and meet with students, say, what are you here for? What are you looking for? And they're actually looking, obviously, to get a degree, but they're looking to put themselves in a position where they can give back. I mean, he was really impressed by the caliber of the students. And I think we do them a disservice if we come in with the things and let's just sort of do another slash and burn. Let's see if we can figure out what higher education ought to look like so it really plays to the desire of those students to have a better life, to do something that allows them to contribute back to the society that gave birth to them.
They were able to convince Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman to wear a tie for the inauguration.
You're not giving me credit for that.
Maybe you're 90% of the convincing part. You're going to send him out on a statewide tour to talk to residents about recreational marijuana. It's something that you see the state perhaps doing during your term here.
I'm not promoting anything. I'm asking the question. I think the Lieutenant Governor has his own. By the way, Eugene DePasquale is here from York County. John Fetterman grew up in York County. I'm from York County, so there's a pattern here. But he's actually going out to find out what the people of Pennsylvania think. And what I wasn't really trying to spark a new direction for Pennsylvania. I was saying let's take account of the reality that New York State is now moving in the direction of legalizing recreational marijuana. The state of New Jersey is moving in the direction of legalizing recreational marijuana. Now, we can do one of two things. We can duck our head in the sand and just ignore what's going on around us, or we can just put our heads up and ask what is happening here, and is it time for us to start thinking differently about this? It's a question. It's not an answer, and that's all I'm trying to do. And I think he has his own ideas about what he wants to do, but this is really a listening tour.
Will you seek counsel from medical professionals on this as well?
Sure. Actually, he's going to all 67 counties. He's creating a website so that people who don't have the time or doesn't fit their schedule to become part of that listening tour can directly send their ideas into his task force, and we'll look for any other way and expertise from whomever. I think one of the other things, we're looking to other states to see what their experience has been so far in this. So yeah, we'll ask everybody.
I know that marijuana and opioids are different, but does the idea of making recreational marijuana legal conflict with the fact that the state has an enormous opioid crisis as well?
One of the questions I think that has come up already is, does this conflict with the legalization that we've already gone through of medical marijuana? And that there's some concern that people will conflate the two. and medical marijuana is actually an effort to give doctors in Pennsylvania, along with doctors in I think 29 or 30 other states at this point in the country, the ability, another option when they're treating patients. So, you know, I think that's a bigger concern. I don't know that there's, to what extent, and maybe we'll find out with this listening tour, that there's general concern that recreational marijuana is going to be worse or better, or the same as the opioids that are now legal.
Okay. You're proposing raising the state's minimum wage again from $7.25 to $12 by July.
I'm proposing again. It has not been raised in a long time.
Yes. Yeah. The Independent Fiscal Office predicts that raising it to $12 would mean 33,000 lost jobs.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's true, but let's go with that. They also believe that there are 1 million people who would have an increase of some sort with that. So that's a big increase in aggregate demand, regardless of what you think the average rate is. That they're saying, I think there are 400,000 people who are now making minimum wage, but between $7.25 an hour, which is minimum wage, and $12 would be net of that 33,000, I think about 1 million people. So it'd be a big increase in aggregate demand. There are economic studies on both sides of this. I think one that seems to be at the heart of a lot of those who look at a reasonable increase in the minimum wage is one that was done by 2 economists at Princeton and published by Princeton University Press in the early 90s that showed that, I think at that point, New Jersey had raised its minimum wage, Pennsylvania had not, and they looked to see what impact that had on fast food, minimum wage jobs in New Jersey and Pennsylvania, and found that actually those jobs in fast food industry actually went up with the increase in the wage. And there was some substitution of capital for labor, as they would expect. But you also had a lot more people who could afford to buy the products that those organizations were selling. So obviously there's a healthy debate. What I try to do with this proposal is say, okay, this is an area where we actually are all paying for this. Because if you're making $7.25 an hour, you actually qualify for public assistance. And if we look at that couple $100 million right now, if we said, I'm going to take the savings, some of the savings, like half of it, and put it into higher compensation for people who now take care of our parents, our grandparents when they're in their homes, our kids, home care, and people with intellectual disabilities, we're going to raise their compensation. The net is still about $119 million, I think, the first full calendar year, $119 million in taxpayer savings. So there's always some subjectivity in what is the right level to raise the minimum wage, or what level to have it at. This is a pretty good one that all of us are all paying for the fact that companies who don't pay for that have their employees basically getting subsidized from the rest of us. And I think that the free market is a free market, not a free ride. And I think the minimum wage that I'm proposing would actually get us to the point where we're not subsidizing those companies.
You say your worst day on the job as governor was the Pittsburgh massacre.
Yeah.
And you had the Tree of Life Rabbi Jeffrey Myers at your inauguration, gave the invocation. Is it time for the state to take a look at its gun laws and to tighten them in any way?
Yeah. And Pennsylvania did, actually, the first time in decades. We passed a bill that took guns out of the hands of domestic abusers. That was in the last session, a couple months ago. I still believe we ought to have universal background checks, which would plug the Pennsylvania gun show loophole. I, along with, I think, every Republican and Democrat out there, wants to ban bump stocks. I want to ban military assault weapons. Those are things that I believe we ought to do. I'm not sure we can get all those done, but I have called for those for many years, and I will continue to do that.
You don't want to run for higher office, right?
That's right. My wife and I have been married 43 years. If I came home and said, Francis, let's go to Iowa, I wouldn't make it to my 44th.
So you're not going to run for president, but if Beto O'Rourke or Kamala Harris came up to you and said, we really need you on the ticket, you would just say, no way.
That's right. I have no aspiration for...
Have you gotten any phone calls?
No. And I don't expect to get any phone calls.
Should Howard Schultz run as an independent?
No.
He should not?
No.
It would lead to the election re-election of Donald Trump?
Well, I think that's one reason, but I'm not sure that... I think that shows somewhat of a cavalier attitude toward the American political system. I think I was stretching it a bit when I ran as an amateur back in 2014, but I went through the hoops, and I think if you're going to run, especially as an outsider, as a first timer, and go in and reform the system, just don't sort of dabble and say I'm going to sort of poke in here from the outside. That's my opinion.
Do you have a favorite candidate? I know it's very early.
No.
Out of the 565,000 people who are running?
No, I don't.
Do you have any reaction to the indictments of John Doherty and City Councilman Bobby Heenan?
Yeah, I mean, people who do wrong should be held to account, and that's true whether they're in organized labor or in a business organization. And I'm sure the legal system will run its course, and they will be held accountable as they should.
What was the defining issue for your first term, and what do you want the defining issue to be for your second?
There are a couple of things. First of all, from the point of view of policies, I think we really need to invest in education, whether you call it workforce readiness, education, schools, but we need, in a limited government market economy, government shouldn't try to do everything, as I said in my inaugural address, but it shouldn't do nothing either. And one of the key things is to equip people with the ability to function in that market economy. And so that's education, that's training. So I've been focused on that from the time I started running to this last budget, and I will continue to focus on that. I think health care. I expanded Medicaid within a week or two of becoming governor 4 years ago, and I still think that's important, and I'm looking for ways to make sure that people have better access to health care. I'll continue to work for that. The opioid epidemic is killing Pennsylvanians. We got to figure out how to stop that. We've got to make sure that we keep investing in jobs where it's appropriate. For example, the Port of Philadelphia, the state has invested in the last 3 years like $300 million, and trying to make sure that the Port of Philadelphia actually is the great port it deserves to be with the right equipment. We have 5 big electric cranes coming into Philadelphia. I think 2 are already there. I think that kind of thing is important. But I think the 2 other things get back to trust. I think I want to continue to do what I hope gets Pennsylvanians to trust that their government is competent, that we can actually be fiscally responsible. And I also want Pennsylvanians to trust that the people who are serving them in places like Harrisburg are honest and have integrity. And I think those 2 things are actually the most important things. If the people of Pennsylvania can't trust their government to be competent and or honest, you're never going to get to a point of saying, let's invest in education, let's invest in this, let's do that. On the other hand, if they trust you, they'll actually, the voters will actually say, give them some rope. I don't necessarily agree with that particular policy, but let's see if it works, because this candidate has actually shown that they're trustworthy.
How's the job changed you over the last 4 years?
I was going to say I lost hair, but I actually didn't have any to start with. I think I have a much greater respect for our democratic institutions. That's with a small d. That actually the voters and the citizens of Pennsylvania actually are pretty smart and have a clear idea of what they want. Don't necessarily agree with everything that I've done, but for the most part, I think have shown a real intelligence in terms of saying this is what we'd like to see. If we don't see it, we're not going to support you.
I remember reading when you were first elected how you were the most liberal governor in the country. Are you the most liberal governor in the country still?
I don't even know what that means. I have not changed. I built a business in York County. It was headquartered in York County. When I left, we were in 33 states. We had major facilities in Massachusetts and Georgia, very successful. And we became successful because we treated people fairly. We treated our employees fairly, treated our customers fairly, treated our vendors fairly. And those things actually matter. I shared 20 to 30% of my net profit with my employees on top of really great compensation, Cadillac benefits, and that made me a very profitable company. So I think the pragmatism of fairness is what I believed 4 years ago, and I believe it right now. If that makes me the most liberal governor in the United States, then so be it.
Moving back to your comments about Amazon, I wanted to touch on Grow PA, which the Chamber, it's a big project with them. Do you foresee some big ideas, some big projects coming to fruition through that? Yeah,
I mean, we were talking about that before this meeting with the executive committee, and what's really interesting is that, again, my experience in business was that you treat people fairly, that you invest in the things that actually can make a real difference. And that's not a liberal or conservative thing. That's just something that actually moves a place like Pennsylvania or Philadelphia forward. Grow PA is a set of initiatives that looks exactly, I'm just saying, like my budget. And we actually had a really good conversation, which is very unusual to have a Democratic governor and a Chamber of Commerce look at each other and say, so we sort of agree with each other. And I think that's the important thing. It's pragmatic. We can actually move Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, York forward by doing these pragmatic things. And I think Grow PA, with its concentration on workforce readiness, education, with its concentration on looking at things that Philadelphia, this region does really well, like precision medicine, looking at things like infrastructure. How do we move goods and people from place to place? How do we communicate with each other? These are things that the business community, the Chamber ought to be looking at. It's things that government in Harrisburg ought to be looking at.
Will the Phillies get Manny Machado or Bryce Harper? Or both?
Okay, you heard it here. I think they're going to get Harper. I'm not sure about Machado. And I'm not sure that who just made an offer? Didn't the Yankees just make an offer for him?
That's what we were talking about, yes. Why do you say Harper is a better possibility?
I think first of all, the Phillies can afford Harper. He's going to be asking for a lot. But I think he'd like to come to Philadelphia, and I think he would be a pretty good fit with Philadelphia. Machado, I'm not sure. But the Phillies are going to be really competitive this year.
You're saying Harper's a gritty player, and he'd fit right in with the...
And a good player, and gritty and good, and I think that fits with the Phillies. Are there any Phillies fans here?
There's a few.
Yeah.
Governor, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
And thank you for having me again. Governor Tom Wolf, thank you. I'm going to stay here for a second. Thanks to the Chamber for continuing to invite me to this great event, and thanks to you for listening. We have a number of great interviews already planned for this new True Philadelphia podcast. So stay tuned and make sure you subscribe. I'm Matt O'Donnell. Stay true.